Okay, so hello, my name is Jane. I'm from Wales. I'm 56 years old, and I just want to document to you as quickly as I can in 10 minutes how, in the last 4 months, I have completely transformed from, I would say, quite an um, apolitical, middle of the road sort of person into a completely paranoid nut job who believes that the world has been taken over by evil psychopaths who are out to destroy us. Okay, so let's get to it. Right, so at the beginning, 4 months ago of this lockdown, I totally bought into it. I believe that there really was a deadly disease out there, and that our governments were actually doing their best to protect us. And all I can say is at that time there was a tiny little pinprick of a doubt, which was kind of a voice saying to me, um, you know, you can't. What's the exit strategy in all this? What's the end game? You can't just lock yourself in your house in the hope of avoiding a virus. Sooner or later, everyone has to go back to work, or we're all going to starve to death. And at first, I think I thought, oh well, but at least we can buy ourselves a bit of time while we work out what's going on and what to do about it. And I bought into that flattening the curve nonsense about the NHS as well. And what's happened over the next 4 months was basically that little tiny flaw of doubt just kind of ripped apart. It just got bigger and bigger until it ripped huge holes in my entire belief system and turned me into the paranoid nut job I am today. Actually, I think there's a part of me that kind of hopes that I am just a paranoid nut job and I'm completely wrong, and actually the world is not how I imagined it to be. So let's go through what were those milestone moments that created another rip in this fabric. And I think the first thing was that time when there was a kind of a spate of world leaders or prominent people who were caught breaking the lockdown. And I thought, God, they don't even believe in it themselves. So that made me think they want us to do it, but they're not going to do it themselves. And then that period sort of ended with the Black Lives Matter protests. And that was when there was no concern about all these people gathering in huge numbers. We suddenly found out the virus was woke and it wouldn't attack anyone who was participating in approved political causes. So then I think it was as information began to come to light about the virus, and we didn't change our policies accordingly. In fact, we doubled down. We doubled down. For example, it was quickly apparent that this was not a kind of bubonic plague, Ebola, HIV. It wasn't even the Spanish flu. It was really in the ballpark of a normal flu. And the kinds of people who were vulnerable to it are exactly the kind of people who are vulnerable to normal flu and indeed to any virus or any pathogen. And what happened? Well, uh, we found that those people who are vulnerable, far from protecting them, the governments of the world actually threw infected patients into their care homes and ensured that large numbers of them died. So, what was that about? It was almost like a genocide. We found out that children are not vulnerable at all and they don't even really pass it on. There's loads of evidence for that. And yet, schools are closed. Children are having their education taken away from them. Just to go back to what I was saying about the death numbers, in fact, I think the flu numbers for 2 years ago are much higher than the numbers for COVID deaths, and the overall death figures are no higher than usual. We've just got the usual amount of deaths going on. And I think it was Dave Cullen or one of his guests made the point that what they seem to have very cleverly done is that they've weaponized usual death figures. So they've taken these figures which nobody bothered about in the past and they've made it as if death and disease was suddenly introduced into the world in January 2020, and now we have to be terrified of illness and death. The other big milestone moment for me was when I found out about the fabricating the death certificates and putting everything down as COVID. You think, well, why would they do that? Why would they lie? Why do they want us to believe that this disease is worse than it is and more people are dying of it than there really are? The next point was not only did they close the education service, they also closed the health service. We no longer have a health service. It's COVID only. And if you've got any other disease, you're just left basically to get even sicker and to die. They've crashed the economy, or it's being slowly crashed. Businesses are folding, people are losing jobs. The cure is definitely worse than the disease. The other big giveaway to me was the amount of propaganda and censorship that goes on. I think that those are big markers of a lie. So if they keep repeating the same information to you over and over, and if they make sure that you don't hear any other information, then they're trying to brainwash you. That's a sign that you're being brainwashed. And particularly the censorship of the information about hydroxychloroquine. So imagine if it really was a load of rubbish. Well, what's new? There's always been alternative medicine and wacky cures for things. They've never tried to suppress them before on the grounds that they're rubbish. So I've come to the conclusion, and this is me thinking that you can just believe the absolute opposite of anything you're told. I've come to the conclusion that it must be true. Hydroxychloroquine must be a cure. And that means they don't want to cure this disease. They don't want there to be a cure for it. And why would that be, I wonder? And then your thoughts go in the direction of the vaccine. They want to bring in a mandatory vaccine. And then you start to wonder, well, okay, if hang on, I need to just pause that for a moment while I just think what I was going to. Okay, yeah, so what I wanted to say is there's never been a vaccine before for a coronavirus. The flu vaccine is kind of a bit patchy. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. In 40 years of looking for one, we've never found an HIV vaccine. But suddenly we're supposed to believe that in a few months' time, this miracle vaccine is going to emerge. And it won't have been trialed properly, but somehow it's going to be mandatory for us all to take it. Now that comes straight out of the Dr. Mengele playbook. When has it ever been mandatory for people to have vaccines? And then you start to wonder, well, what's in it? Because it's certainly not a vaccine for a flu-like virus. So why are we all being made to have this vaccine? The final thing I'd like to say is many people critical of this policy continue to believe it is about a kind of mismanaged public health crisis, and the government mean well, but they're just getting it wrong. They're hopeless managers. I'm afraid I don't believe that at all, because I can't credit the government with such stupidity. I think they know perfectly well what they're doing. And I think it was Freud or some psychologist said that if a consequence of an action is predictable and probable, then probably that was what was intended all along. And that, of course, that's enshrined into the common law. That's that very same idea. So I don't say that people like Boris Johnson are behind it. I think Boris Johnson is just some kind of puppet. He's just a bit of a, as are all governments, all democratically elected governments, I've come to think they're just a kind of facade, and the real power goes on somewhere behind the scenes. And I think whoever is running this show, they are achieving what they want, which is the demolition of our economy, the erosion of civil society. We're without a health service, without an education system. They're going to take everything away from us. Okay, right, I did it. So just my last words are to say I'm an old woman. It looks like my old age is not going to be as long or as pleasant as I might have hoped, but basically I've had a pretty good innings, and really it's the young generation that I feel sorry for, my children, my nieces, my nephews, my friends' children, and I think they're not going to have the comfortable lives that we enjoyed, and I'm afraid they're going to be called upon to fight like the grandparents' generations who fought in the Second World War. Maybe it won't be the same kind of scenario, but they are going to have to fight nonetheless, and some of them are going to lose their lives in the process. Okay, that's it, I think. Bye bye. Don't be too depressed. Okay, bye bye.